men found tied up near a pickup truck in the same area where the abduction of 4 Americans took place.
A cartel reportedly apologizes for the kidnapping of 4 Americans in Mexico and allegedly hands over the men responsible.
Cartels are known to be brutal and vicious. They abduct, torture, and kill people without an ounce of remorse. Yet this cartel wrote a letter saying they were sorry about what they did to 4 U.S. citizens.
We have decided to deliver those involved and directly responsible.
What brought about this show of remorse? Did they really mean it, or was it just so the U.S. government didn't come after them? Let's explore why the cartel apologized after killing these Americans. Formed in the 1930s, the Gulf Cartel, or CDG, is one of the oldest and most powerful cartels in Mexico. It's based out of Matamoros, Tamaulipas, which is directly across the U.S. border in Texas, and its founder, Juan Nepomuceno Guerrera, is often considered the godfather of U.S.-Mexico border cartels. He led the organization for over 50 years before his nephew, Juan Garcia Abrego, took over and made it the criminal syndicate that we know today, capable of doing the most despicable things to get their way. Like other criminal syndicates in Mexico, CDG doesn't just limit itself to drug trafficking. It also operates through protection rackets, extortions, kidnapping, and other criminal activities. Its members are also known for intimidating the public and using extreme violence to get what they want. So what happened on March 3, 2023 did not really come as a surprise. On that day, 33-year-old Latavia McGee, a mother of 6 from South Carolina, was going to have a tummy tuck procedure done in Mexico, which would have cost her almost double the price in the US. She was accompanied by 3 guys, Zindell Brown, Eric James Williams, and Shaid Woodard. Everything was going smoothly, and they were just 15 minutes from the doctor's office when suddenly a pickup truck came out of nowhere and pulled up in front of them.
We turned down this little side road because we was gonna see if that led us to the destination and we was gonna turn around. We heard a car beat the horn and pulled around us. Zindell was in the back seat. He said, "Don't stop."
Latavia and her friends noticed that the people in the pickup truck had guns, so they tried to get away, but the pickup truck chased after them.
We drove through a few streets and corners until we got back on the main street, and that's when a gang of shooting started.
Scared for their lives, 2 of the 4 friends, Zindell and Shaid, jumped out of the car and tried to run, but they were gunned down.
They was at Tay window beating on her window with a little gun, probably a 9mm. And I jumped out of the driver's side, and when I jumped out on the driver's side, that's when I was shot in both legs.
As their friends were bleeding to death on the streets, Latavia and Eric were forced into the back of the cartel's truck at gunpoint. This horrifying moment was captured by nearby CCTV cameras.
And your 2 friends, were they still alive at that point?
They were alive at that point. I couldn't see Shaheed because he was like behind me, but I could see Zindell back. He was hit 2 times and big chunks of was gone out of him.
Their 2 friends who were still alive but struggling to stay conscious were also loaded in the back of the truck with Latavia and Eric. But the 4 friends were not the only victims in the shooting. A Mexican woman who was just going about her business was hit by a stray bullet and killed instantly. The gunman did all of this in broad daylight at around 11:45 a.m. People were just walking by, minding their own business, and nobody stopped to even pay attention to what was happening. The 4 friends were taken into an isolated safe house filled with guns and masked men. The men then started interrogating Latavia and Eric.
We rode probably 10, 15 more minutes, and we got to the spot where they was taking us. The investigator or interrogator us more. And that's when Shaheed said, "I love y'all, I'm gone." And he died right there.
Latavia and Eric didn't know what the gunman wanted from them, and after a few hours of interrogation, the cartel realized that the 2 were who they thought they were, so they decided to stitch up their injuries without anesthesia.
They put my leg on a 2x4, and then they stitched it up.
They just stitched it up?
Right.
Did they give you
no pain medicine or nothing?
The stitches did not hold for long and would bust out later that evening, leaving them in excruciating pain. Meanwhile, Zindell was still trying to hang on to life, but he was drifting fast. Latavia stayed with him the entire time, asking for his forgiveness for bringing him along in an ill-fated trip.
I just told him I'm sorry because I asked him to come with me. And he was like, "It's okay, I'm your brother. I'm supposed to be there for you. I love you."
Zindell would, unfortunately, die about an hour later. Later that evening, Latavia saw one of the sicarios watching something on his phone. When she asked him what he was watching, he showed her the video of them getting kidnapped earlier that day.
I just started crying. It's like I'm never going home.
Meanwhile, the shocking footage of the four being kidnapped had already gone viral and was all over the news. Efforts to save them were already underway, and the FBI even offered a $50,000 reward for their return. The White House and the State Department condemned the abduction and killings, with some Republicans in Congress even calling for a U.S. military invasion of Mexico to combat the cartels. Others called for the U.S. to designate the cartels as organizations.
We are closely following the assault and kidnapping of 4 U.S. citizens in Matamoros, Mexico. These sorts of attacks are unacceptable.
There was a concern about whether Mexican police would respond urgently to resolve the issue, as cartels in Mexico have been known to overpower the police. However, the pressure from the media and the U.S. government forced Mexican President López Obrador to take action against the involved cartel. After the gunman's truck was identified, multiple intensive search operations were carried out by heavily armed Mexican security forces from different agencies. But the rescue efforts would not be easy, as the abductors were deliberately relocating the Americans to various locations to create confusion and hinder rescue efforts. Throughout their ordeal, Latavia and Eric remained together, seeking comfort and solidarity in each other's presence. It's hard to tell the trauma they must have gone through during that period.
They tried to make us have with each other, but
we told them we was brothers and sisters.
Brother and sister, and that she was pregnant.
That's really messed up. The horrific ordeal would come to an end 4 days after the kidnapping, when they were finally rescued.
2 Americans who survived being caught in a shootout and kidnapped by cartel gunmen were taken to a hospital in Brownsville, Texas today. Mexican authorities found Latavia McGee and Eric Williams at a stash house outside the city of Matamoros, after gunmen moved them to multiple locations to avoid capture.
During the operation, Mexican authorities arrested a man who was allegedly guarding the premises. Disturbing images of the scene showed Latavia barefoot and covered in dirt, with noticeable streaks of blood on her left leg, though she didn't have any major injuries. Eric had a gunshot wound in his left leg, but fortunately, it wasn't life-threatening. As he was being transferred to the hospital, he called his wife to inform her that he was okay.
Did he tell you anything about that moment at all?
No, we didn't discuss it because it was, to hear his voice, it was just a lot of crying. My son was there, and my son just wanted to hear his voice. And then he had to go because he was going into the hospital.
The bodies of Zindel and Shahid were also brought into the United States so their families would be able to bury them.
The bodies of 2 Americans killed in Mexico are now back in the U.S. a week after their group crossed the border and came under fire. Investigators believe a notorious Mexican drug cartel attacked the group in a likely case of mistaken identity.
Understandably, the families of the 2 victims were completely devastated to see them come back inside caskets.
He was my baby, you know, and for him to be taken from me like that, it was very, very hurtful.
Investigators believe that the cartel had attacked the 4 Americans thinking that they were Haitian smugglers. But here's the twist. 2 days after the rescue mission, something unexpected happened.
A dramatic image out of Matamoros, Mexico. 5 men found tied up near a pickup truck in the same area where the abduction of 4 Americans took place. A handwritten note on the truck's windshield claiming to be from the Gulf Cartel, saying, "We have decided to deliver those involved and directly responsible."
For some reason, the Gulf Cartel had decided to apologize for what happened and even handed over 5 of their men who said they were responsible for the killing and the kidnappings of Latavia and her friends.
It's not of any surprise that they are under a lot of pressure to put this behind them and try to distance themselves as best they can.
In the note, the cartel claimed that the 5 gunmen acted against the rules of the cartel and showed a lack of discipline, which is a very unusual thing for a cartel to say. Whether that's true or not, the apology letter was seen as an attempt to protect the cartel against the DEA. The 5 gunmen were handed over to the police as some sort of olive branch to the U.S. But this is actually not the first time the cartel had targeted American citizens.
This is for the record. Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt. Shot up.
In a horrifying incident in 2020, 3 American women and 6 children were ambushed and brutally murdered by members of a drug cartel in Mexico. They were all part of the same Mormon family. The family had relocated to Mexico some years back and had settled in the Sonora region near the border. On this particular day, 17 family members were traveling in 3 separate cars when armed gunmen came out of nowhere and started shooting at the cars that was carrying 3 defenseless women and their children.
They were big guns and they were wearing masks. I was trying to duck down and my mom got everybody down. It felt real scary and it felt like a lot of bullets.
But the evil cartel members were not satisfied with just shooting at the vehicle. They decided to set it on fire with the people inside.
Afterwards, they got us out of the car and they just got us on the floor and then they drove off.
Seeing his family in distress, 13-year-old Devin Langford gathered his courage and ran 14 miles to get help for his siblings. He did manage to get home safely and tell his dad what had happened. His father then sent a message to the other family members who went out to the scene to rescue the others.
We have Devin. He ran all the way home, and he says that the rest of the kids that are still alive are up under a tree.
By the time the family was rescued, 3 women and 6 children had sadly died. One of the women was Devin's mother, Donna, and 2 of the children were his brothers.
The whole thing was a massacre, is what it was, on innocent lives. The most innocent.
Fortunately, 8 of the children survived and were airlifted to the hospital and treated for their injuries. But you can imagine the trauma they'll have to live with. Just like the incident with Latavia and her friends, this captured a lot of media attention with the then President Donald Trump tweeting.
If Mexico needs or requests help in cleaning out these monsters, the United States stands ready, willing and able to get involved and do the job quickly and effectively. This is the time for Mexico, with the help of the United States, to wage war on the drug cartels and wipe them off the face of the earth.
But Mexico President Obrador said that Mexico can handle the situation by themselves.
I'll speak with President Trump to thank him for his support and see if in cooperation agreements there's the possibility of getting help in cases where it's necessary. I don't think we need the intervention of a foreign government to deal with these cases.
Still, it's still very rare that Americans are targeted by cartels, precisely because the kind of attention it attracts and the repercussions tend to be much bigger for the attackers than if there were only Mexican casualties involved, which is really sad. Every life matters, and the authorities should handle each case with the seriousness it deserves. The 5 men who were involved in the kidnapping of Latavia and her friends have since been charged.
Tonight, for the first time, a look at 5 of the men authorities say kidnapped 4 Americans in northern Mexico, killing 2 of them. Each allegedly members of the Gulf Cartel. They were captured not by authorities, but apparently by the cartel itself.
Thanks for watching, guys. What do you think motivated the cartel to send the apology letter? Do you know of any other cases where the cartel showed some remorse for their actions? Let me know in the comments section, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button.